Tractate Eiruvin Daf Pei Shura line 13 Uderav Meheicha. What we said yesterday, that a person can forbid his fellow toward the airspace. So where is the source that the Rav hold it? Let me refresh the memories of those who just walk in. Yesterday we used the picture number 282 from Meorot Daf. Everyone see it?
Yeah.
Yes? Yes? No? Okay. We talk about two gzus traot, one domain, another domain, the communication between the two, and we discuss the airspace. So they said, שתי גזוז תראות, לזו למעלה מזו עשו מחצה לעליונה ולא עשו מחצה לתחתונה, שתיהן אסורות עד שיערבו. So if you tell me that it's applied to שתי גזוז תראות, these two pieces outside of domain, that it's hanging the bottom part using the top part, so you make a partition for the bottom, not for the top. Why? Because we explained at length yesterday that the people on the top can basically push it down, like we draw it down, it's called beshilshul, and people from the bottom, they need to do both. They need to do zrika and shilshul. They need to do throwing and also lowering it. So meaning that the bottom one use it toward the top one. So that's the source for you to say that a person did not forbid toward his fellow toward the airspace. So he said, אמר רב הונא, אמר רב לא שנו אלא בסמוכה, אבל במופלגת ארבעה עליונה מותרת ותחתונה אסורה. That's apply only if it's a סמוכה, which means that we explained yesterday that it's close to each other. So in other words, when you have the throwing at the four in the air, it's called lo shmei shimush. So it's not carried, it's not considering as shimush, as use, and the tachtona, the bottom one, did not forbid the top ones. So why the bottom one, it's in a distance of in such a small distance, allow if it's a 4 handbreadth, because the people from the bottom one need to throw the dli from the very bottom toward here. So it means that using in such a manner, they not control that water, because if you look at the scenario, look how long is the process. And since these are the people who have the power over that, not this one, so therefore they're not, according to Rav, a person did not forbid his fellow to the airspace. But the Gemara rejected that idea and said, Dilma shaneacha, dekivan de laze bizrika velaze bishilshul, lechudei kelaze bizrika velaze befetach dame. So basically what the rabbi said is, the sages forbids and the people on the tachtona, on the bottom, to use in such a situation, because number one, they hold that in our scenario, this is a better scenario. In our scenario, the people on the bottom have, number one, the length is more than 10th. Number two, they said the people on the bottom, it's very difficult for them to use it, because we talk here about three different components. Let's make sure that we are all on the same page. Three different components. Component number one is the idea that we have the heights, and the heights here is the asarat fachim, the 10 handbreadth, which is a heights. It's an issue because it takes both entities, zrika and shilshul, throwing and lowering. Number two, we explained that we don't have the issue of lower than 4 tfachim, the 4 handbreadth in between them. So it means we always, if you remember, we said it in many occasions, that when you have an Eiruvin and you have one entity that it's easy for them to use, benachat, tashmish benachat, and you have the other group that it's hard for them to do, what do? You go always by the group that it's easy for them to use. So we get back to a square one. We said, how do we know that the person did not forbid his fellow toward the using of airspace? So he said, Ela meha דאמר רב נחמן, אמר רבא בר אבוה, אמר רב. שני בתים ושלוש חורבות ביניהם. So this is a picture number 288. Everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay. So we have here one house, another one. You have in between 3 rounded spots. Okay? Rounded properties.
Yes.
Now, the owner of one property using his domain, how? זה משתמש בסמוך לו על ידי זריקה, וזה משתמש בסמוך לו על ידי זריקה. Okay, so one using toward the window the rounded property that it's close to him, and this one he using this part, which means it's like toward the window, but it's not considering an entrance, which means throwing is throwing toward the room property. So and Rav using the language of throwing in order to imply that each of the property owner can use the one who's close toward his domain. So now the middle part belongs to whom? You tell me. Middle part. Look carefully. 1, 2, middle part. Middle part belongs to whom? Two. Both of them, right?
Yes.
So therefore it's forbidden to both of them. So since this part is forbidden to both of them, you may say that the other should be forbidden as well. Okay? So that's the chidush here. They said that since each one of these rounded property connected to the one next to her, so therefore we measure it, that's the Ritva and that's the Rashi, by the one who close by her, and therefore the one who attach to that round property can use it, but not the other one. In other words, this one can use here and this one can use here. And basically we said, we just turned the page. So we just turned the page, 85b, והאמצעי אסור, and the middle part is forbidden. So later we explain that that's applied to ruin the property, that it's a middle that will not be part of the two connected part, so it's just somehow close by to these two properties. So therefore you cannot carry to that one, to the middle one, because each of these property owners use that during the week, but using it toward lowering to that part that is close to his entrance, to his window. And in order for us to clarify this story, we use we use a story. Yativ Rav Brona v'ka'amar la leha shmata. Rav Brona came and he just stated this halacha in the name of Rav Elazar, not Rabbi Eliezer, Rav Elazar. So he said it in a language of questioning. That is a story and a statement. Harbe Rav, such a Torah scholar, Amar Rav Hachi, is that true that that's what Rav said? Amar le ein, he said yes. So Rabbi Elazar responds, Achaveli ushpizei, show me where he lives. Achaveli, Rav Brona showed him. Atalekamei, the Rav. Rabbi Elazar came before Rav. Amar le, Amar Marache, Amar le ein. He says, did you say, did you master, did you honor said so and so? He said yes. Amar le, Rabbi Elazar said to Rav, why did you forbade the middle property, the ruined middle property between the two property lines? In other words, again, we have two homeowners, we have two ruined properties, and we have the middle part. So he asked him, what's the reason that you forbade it? It's not because each homeowner can use the throwing method for that middle ruined property, and therefore it's forbidden to both of them. So it means, what do you derive indirectly? That the person forbids his fellow toward the airspace. And that's the big discussion. So if that's the case, why each of them can use the one it's attached? I understand what you said, that it's a fellow can forbid another neighbor toward the airspace. But if that's the case, so how come they allow to go ahead and use the attached ruined property to the homeowner by throwing? Because if you allow that, each of them now using the ruined property next to them, they can continue to throw to the following one. Mm-hmm. So if you forbids the middle one, you should forbids everything, also the other two. So maybe you said that both of them just using the ruining property, the extreme side ruining properties, but each owner of the property using the next door to him in a method of very easy way, which means it's not hard for that owner to use it. How? He can just lower from his window. Mm-hmm. So the other fellow, it's hard for him, it's much harder. He needs to throw from one ruined property to the middle one. And in regard to those opening space in those partition, it's basically one property it's easy, the other property it's hard to do. So it means that each ruined property belongs to the owner who's next door to that domain, and forbidden to the other fellow. V'hamaru de'amar, but you are the one who said what? Lazeh b'shilshul ולזה בזריקה, שניהם אסורים. You are the one who said what? If you have the one of the courtyard only by lowering the object down, and the resident of the other courtyard by throwing an object to the top of it, so neither courtyard has convenient access to it, and therefore both residents are forbidden to use it. Because the truth is, if you compare lawyering to throwing, lawyering is more convenient than throwing it. So it means that you contradicted what you said earlier. So Rav elaborated and he explained, and he said, Amar Lei, you have a basic assumption on the wrong assumption, wrong idea. He says, Mi savart dekaimei keshua? Lo, dekaimei kachatzuva. That's very beautiful idea. He said, what do you think? You are thinking that all the three properties are basically lining up in a shua, in a line, in one line, which means it's like the property line. You see this entrance, you see one property, and this is the first room, and the second room, and the third room, and there's another homeowner, and there are all three properties, the middle one standing in the line with the other two properties. I have a news for you. That's not the story that I'm speaking here. You know what I'm speaking? It's called kachatzuva. It's like tripod, which means in the triangular form. What does that mean, triangular form? This is one domain, this is another domain, and now you see the triangular, 1, 2, 3. Now, you guys tell me, what's the difference between this and this? Right away you see differences. Help me! What's the difference? What's the difference between if it's all standing in one line or if it's triangular? 1, 2, 3. What's the difference? Use your brain. I know it's early in the morning. Okay, so think about it. This domain with this partition in the middle, it's connected to this domain.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
This domain, using this partition in the middle, connected to this domain. This domain, it's open domain with no partition. So therefore, since this standing is in such a way in triangular, what happened? Two of the room each adjust to one of the houses, located at each other, and the third position on the one side of the other two, near both houses. So the middle room is prohibited to the resident of both houses because both houses are equally inconvenient. But direct access to that. However, each of the other rooms is permitted to the resident of the adjacent house as is direct access to it, while the resident of the other house can reach it only through the air of the room nearest to him. So Rav maintained that one person does not render it prohibited for use by another by the way of the air. So again, this one used the window, and this is the open domain. So this one can basically using this part, and it's easy for him, because shilshul, he's lawyering toward his window. So he let's call him Mr. Reuven. Mr. Reuven can lawyer from this one, easy for him, fine. He cannot access this part. You see it's a different room domain. This fellow, let's call him Shimon. Shimon can lower from his domain. So this domain have an access and permitted to this one. This domain allowed to this one, to Reuven, and this domain has no access. You cannot lower. It's not connected. Clear?
Yes.
So it means that I hold, he said, who is he, Rav, that the person did not forbid his fellow toward the air space. So it means that Rav did not forbid his fellow, which means that God not forbid Mr. Reuven to Mr. Shimon and vice versa to the airspace between them. Next, Amar le Rav Papa le Rava, Lema Shmuel lately the Rav Dimi. Do you mean to say that Shmuel disagree with what Rav Dimi said? Dechiata Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Israel to Babylon, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Makom she'en bo arba'a al arba'a, mutar livnei reshut harabim velivnei reshut hayachid lechatef alav. He said, if you have a space, he says a place less than 4 by 4 handbreadth, inside is an exempt domain with respect to carrying on Shabbat, and consequently, if this place is located between a public domain and a private domain, so the people mutar livnei reshut harabim velivnei reshut hayachid lechatef alav. It's permitted for both people in the public domain and people in the private domain to adjust the burden on their shoulders in it, as long as they do not do not exchange objects with each other in the Mekom Ptur, in the exempt domain. So basically the open space 4 by 4, because it's not considering as an important place, putting any object there, it's not considering hanacha gmura, a final permanent, putting an item on a certain spot, and it's considering it's like that chefetz, that item is up in the air. Meaning, if a person put that item in a spot that is less than 4 by 4, and he doesn't have the same use as a person who are close by. It's like using an airspace in a very far away. It's like a detached airspace for use. So therefore, Shmuel hold that the person did not forbid his fellow toward the airspace, and therefore we understand why people in the public domain and the people in the private domain to adjust toward their shoulders without any type of tikkun, change the status, because both of them using, which we call in our language tashmish garua, something that it's not as a easy access of use, and therefore is basically not doesn't have a lower category that like using an airspace. Now the Gemara in a way objected it, and they said it's not necessarily to say that Shmuel disagree on Rav Dimi. The Gemara said hatam reshuyot deoraita hacha reshuyot derabbanan וחכמים עשו חיזוק לדבריהם יותר משל תורה. They said, in regard to something that it stands between public domain to private domain, you do not need to move that ziz, that part, in order to make sure that one will not enter to the other domain, because public domain, private domain is reshuyot deoraita, is domain to existence domain by Torah law. So the sages did not prohibit the use of the place due to the air. But here, with regard to air between private domain, we are dealing with domain that it's the prohibition against carrying is rabbinic. So therefore, it's a rabbinic law. The sages reinforce their statements even more than the Torah, which means that the sages wants to reinforce the wall between the two courtyard, that more in a way more than the Torah, and they require to take this ziz in order to make it a care that everyone see it. So it's like the sages want to put a boundaries, a safeguards for their decrees, so they make it in a way more even than Torah. So Rashba here explained that the Rav only prohibited 2 courtyards. They actually use their shared wall, but not the airspace alone is involved. But the problem is, according to Rav, who said that the person forbids his fellow to the airspace, so therefore each one of the property owner can use the airspace in order to use the ruined property that attach to that property. Amar le Ravina le Rava, mi amar Ravachi, that the person did not forbid his fellow to the airspace. Where you find that Rav said it? Ve'aitmar shnei batim mishnei tzidei reshut harabim. If you remember, we studied it many times. You have 2 properties in 2 sides of the public domain. So 2 sides of the public domain. Rabba בערבון אמר רב, אסור לזרוק מזה לזה, ושמואל אמר מותר לזרוק מזה לזה. One said that you cannot throw an item from one domain to another, and Shmuel said it's permitted to throw from one to another. So it means that Rav, he forbade the act of throwing because there is an issue of a prohibition and an air of the public domain that lies between the 2 houses. Amar lei, lav miukim לדמיד לאחד ומיתת אחד זימן דמיגנדר ונפיל ואתלה תויי. He said it was not because this machloket that one of the houses is higher and the other one is lower, like we mentioned earlier. Here, it's sometimes the situation is that people throwing, if you have 2 domains and one is higher than the others, from the highest domain to the lowest domain, and because of that, guess what's happening? That sometimes that item will not reach that the other domain, and it can fall to where? To the public domain. And therefore what's going to happen? The property owner is going to come and pick up and carry it in a public domain to a private domain, and now you're talking about a violation of Torah laws. So it means the prohibition is achnasa, that bringing an item from what? From public domain to private domain. So therefore, the key point of Yipol Chefetz, that an item will fall there, that's not the key problem, because it's called mitasek. It's like melechet hotza'ah, but someone who bothered to go down and pick up from the street to the house, that's clear that he intend to bring it in from public domain to private domain, and either because he forgot that today is Shabbat, or because whatever the reason is, maybe preoccupied with something. So they said, the big discussion here, Tosfot have a discussion, Rashi have a discussion, what's exactly involved here that forbidden, that if it's the airspace or not the airspace. But now we're going to the Mishnah. The Mishnah speak about when we have a Eruvei Chatzerot, using an Eruv between courtyard, we basically attach all the residents in a courtyard to make them as a one domain. So the bread of the Eruv needs to be in one of those domain, meaning one of the courtyard. And you make the Eruv there, and that's very different than merging an alleyway, because in merging alleyway is the idea is to attach all the residents of the yard to be a partner of all the yards, and therefore you can put the food in one of the courtyard. And now the Mishnah dealing which part is considering a dwelling place that you can put in the courtyard. So picture number 290, the Mishnah starts as follows: הנותן את עירובו בבית שער, אך סדרה ומרפסת אינו עירוב, הדר שם אינו אוסר עליו. Picture 290, one building, two building. You see the entrance here and you see the entrance here. What's the difference? This is what? The first one is gatehouse. Okay? And the second one is Achsadra. What is called?
Portico.
Portico. That's the second one. So, if one would place the Eruv of courtyard in the gatehouse or in a portico, a roof structure without wall or without incomplete wall, or one who deposited in a balcony, והדר שם אינו אוסר עליו, and the one who resides there in any of these structures does not render it prohibited for the homeowner and for the other residents of the courtyard to carry, even he did not contribute to the Eruv. However, they said בית התבן ובית הבקר ובית העצים ובית האוצרות הרי זה עירוב, והדר שם אוסר. However, if one deposits an Eruv in a hay shed or in the cow shade or in the wood shade or in a storehouse, it's a valid Eruv, and that's as it is located in a properly guarded place, and therefore one who resides there with permission, if he neglected to contribute to the Eruv, so he renders it prohibited for the homeowner and for the other resident of the courtyard to carry. רבי יהודה אומר, אם יש שם תפיסת יד של בעל הבית, אינו אוסר. Rabbi Yehuda says, if the homeowner has there, meaning in the shed or the other places listed, the rights to use it, which means if he entitled to use all or part of the area for his own purposes, then one who lives there does not render it prohibited for the homeowner, because the area is considering for the homeowner. So the Mishnah Brura said in Shin Ayin, he explained, it's not enough that one homeowner leave for himself the right to use that property, that rental property, but he needs to have some items that belong to him in action, in reality, to have some items there. Now, the whole question of fisat yad, of the homeowner, that the uses, the right of uses, it's a very big discussion among the rabbis, because the big question is when exactly you require the homeowner to have a physical attachment to the property and when not. But now we're bringing several locations that we can use to put items in עירובי חצרות ושיתופי מבואות, using a Eruv for courtyard and merging alleyway. אמר רב יהודה ברי דרב שמואל בר שילת, כל מקום שאמרו שהדר אינו אוסר, הנותן את עירובו אינו אוסר חוץ מבית שער דיחיד. So all those places between the yard that the sages said that someone who lived there did not carry a prohibition to carry in that courtyard, because that spot is not considering a dwelling place. So someone who put his Eruv there is not considering is not a valid Eruv, except חוץ מאוויר מבית שער ליחיד. So excluding a gatehouse that belong to an individual, because if the structures is used for passageway by only one person, it does not render prohibited to the other residents of the courtyard, and the Eruv there is considering a valid Eruv. וכל מקום שאמרו חכמים אין מניחים בו עירוב, מניחים בו שיתוף. And when they say that it's issue to joining of courtyard, a merging of alleyway may be placed there except for the airspace of the alleyway which is not inside the courtyard. So Rashi explained that it's considering shimur, that joining with that alleyway lo mintar, it's not mishtamer, it's not be guarded. So the Gemara asks, Maika Mashmelan, what do we learn from that? What's something new that we learn from that? Tanina, we learn in the Mishnah, הנותן את עירובו בבית שער אכסדרה ומרפסת אינו עירוב. If someone places Eruv in a gatehouse or in a portico or the balcony, it's not a valid Eruv. So the Gemara said, מדייקת, Eruv הוא דולאבי, specifically to use it as a Eruv between the courtyard, the food in between, it's not sufficient, it's not actively in use, ha shituf avi, but merging in the alleyway it is. So we derive from that Mishnah, that even those spaces that it's invalid to use for Eruv, for proper Eruv, it's still good for the merging alleyway. So what Rav Yehuda tell us? What type of chidush he want to tell us? So the Gemara respond, Beit Shar Yachid, Beit Shar Yachid Ba'avir Demavoy Yitzrich Alei. He talk about a gatehouse that belonged to one individual and the airspace of the alleyway. The lot none that we did not learn from the Mishnah. That it said Tanya Nameachi Anoten Teruvo B'Shar Achsad Urupes Dochitzer Uruvod Erezaruv. So we have another by that said that it is an Eruv if we put in all those places the gatehouse, etc. So they said Vatnan En Ze Eruv, and we said just it's not valid. He said Eimar is a shituf. You have to say that it's a valid merging of the alleyway. So it's basically one braita was meshubeshet, was not correct. Another thing the Gemara want to say, shitu bevoy lo mintar, that one place of food or the merging of the alleyway in the alleyway itself, it's not probably guarded. That it's not, like considering it's not there at all. So Amar Rav Yehuda ela eima, you have to say bechatzer shebamavoy, that the courtyard in the alleyway is valid. So meaning one braita was meshubeshet, wasn't right. Now it's another din in regards to putting both Eruv and Shituf. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, בני חבורה שהיו מסובים וקדש עליהם היום. If you have a group of people who gather dining together in Erev Shabbat, and they become sanctified with them, which means Shabbat began while they are eating. So imagine that, especially now we're going to a heavy summertime, So in many communities they're accepting Shabbat earlier. But here we talk about group of people that sit, several neighbors, and they that living in the same alleyway, in the same development area. They sit for the meal, because in those days they used to lean, like you read in Pesach, doing the meal. And all of a sudden it's Shabbat. So now they need to do Eruv. What they do? So they said, you take the bread that is in a table, and you make it, that's the Eruv. So now the Tosfot and the Ritva ask about Kinyanim, because here the issue is that the one who sponsor that meal did not give them a Kinyan Meforash, didn't give the right over that bread in advance to them. But since he invited them, the Tosfot and Ritva said, since that fellow invited them to come and join the meal in his table, so therefore every single attendee, every single person that come there is considering a partner in that bread, and it's like Eruv that collected together. So again, imagine a development. They have 6 neighbors. Mr. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zvulun, 6 people. And now Reuven is the sponsor for that meal. So all the other 5, they are basically considering a partner. So even it wasn't a declaration in advance of taking this bread and making it belong to everyone by being part of that. Here, the fact that he invited them to his meal, that invitation took place before Shabbat, so therefore they can use the bread, and everyone is like a partner of that bread. Ve'amrela mishum shituf, and some said that they may rely on the bread for merging of an alleyway. So since we have 2 different girsaot, 2 different versions, אמר רבה ולא פליגי, כאן במסובין בבית, כאן במסובין בחצר. One, they speak that it's because an Eruv would speak about people who gather together in the house. So since it's in the house, it's covered for both. But the other, it's the airspace of the courtyard. So since the bread is not located inside the domain, so they cannot depend on that for Eruv Chatzerot, only Shitufei Mevorot, because Eruv Chatzerot you need to have it in the Chatzer, in the courtyard. Shitufei Mevorot can be in the house, since Shitufei Mevorot is the merging of an alleyway. So the bread can be inside the domain, inside the roof, inside the domain of the house. So again, there is a Tosfot that have a lot of issue here. What exactly the situation? Does that mean that everyone sitting around the table in the house or in the yard? And what exactly the Tosfot have issues of how to do it, how they allow it? It's basically at the end of page 71b, the Tosfot have a discussion over this matter. Anyway, Amar lei Abaye le Rabba, Tanya demsaya lach. I can bring a proof to the point you just said, and to reconcile the 2 versions in the word of Shmuel. And he said, Eruvei chatzerot bechatzer, v'shitufei mevot b'mavoi. He says the Braita said that the joining a courtyard you need to place it in the courtyard, and merging an alleyway you need to put it in the alleyway. Ve'avinan ba, and we ask in regard to this Braita, Eiruvei chatzerot bechatzer. Do you mean to say that you need to take the bread of joining a courtyard and put it in the air space of that courtyard? Ve'atnan hanotenet eruvo beveit shar achsad u'merpeset eno eruv. We say that if someone put deposited an eruv in the gateway or in the remember we just studied it in the portico or in the balcony, is not a valid eruv. So you have a clear indication in the Mishnah that the eruv may not be deposited in the airspace of the courtyard. So you have to say, Ema עירובי חצרות בבית שבחצר ושילופי מבואות בחצר שבמבוי. You have to say that עירובין in a courtyard are placed in a house in a courtyard. And the merging of alleyways are placed in a courtyard that opens into the alleyway, into that specific alleyway and not the other alleyways. That's basically the Rashi's way of thinking. But there are others who think a little different, and the Gaon Yaakov elaborate on that at length. Now we're going back to the statement we have in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im yesh sham tfisat yad. Rabbi Yehuda says, if one homeowner was there, so in the hay shed or in the one other places, so he said, the right of uses, the person living there, he basically doesn't make that courtyard prohibited. Hey chedam tfisat yad. The Gemara asks, what are the exactly circumstances of a right of usage? So the Gemara asks, Kegon hey chedam tfisat yad. What is the circumstances of the user right of use? Kegon chatzero shel ben bonyas. An example of the fellow was extremely wealthy. So he has a lot of properties, and it was several properties that he rent to other people, or not rent, basically lend in a sense to our people, give it to them. And because he was so wealthy, he put in their houses different utensils for all year round. So even he basically lent the house to another fellow, because his utensil was still there. It's still considering by the ownership of Ben Bunyas, and the residence was considering as a guest. It doesn't have the courtyard, independent courtyard. The Reef and the Rosh said that Ben Bunyas used to have a lot of materials like merchandise and things that he owns in there are different properties, and it's different residents or different people in each of them. Some hold that it was a rental properties. Others said that it was a property that was given in a special agreement. But anyway, so they said, Atal lekamei de Rebbe. It's one time that Ben Bunyas came before the leader of that generation, which is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Amar lehu panu makom leven mea maneh. He says, place a spot for someone who has 100 times 100 zuz, which means one of these status deserve to be honored in accordance with his riches. That is like a person who have 10,000 zuz. Mm-hmm. So Rashi here said, Klomar makom chashuv. So I explained in my book, Biura Klomar Berashi al Hashas, that it has to be connection between the pieces, and Rashi said that makom chashuv, it's a preparation for a place, because there's said in the other Gemara that Rabbi mechabed ashirim, that Rabbi honor those wealthy individuals, and therefore Ben Bunyas was example. Ata ini shachrina. So as another fellow came there, Amar lehu, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi once again turned to his attendants and he said to them, page Peivav, Panu makom leven 200 maneh. Give a place, Rashi said, כלומר מקום חשוב יותר בין גדולים לפי כבוד עושרו. So we understand earlier, Rashi asked, I explained in my book that what's the nafkamina, what's the difference between the first osher, the second one. So they said that this fellow has earned more than the others. So basically Rabbi Yehuda Nasi hold that he deserves more recognition or more than the other fellow. אומר לפניו רבי ישמעאל ברבי יוסי, רבי אביו של זה יש לו 1,000 ספינות בים וכנרדם 1,000 עיירות ביבשה. Bonias himself, the father of Ben Bonias, he has, you know how much Yes, he has thousands of sheep out in the sea, and corresponding to them 1,000 towns in the land. Meaning, they use this term in the Talmud. The Maratz Chayut explained that it's not necessarily the exact amount of thousand and thousand, and it's just a language of it's like almost the language of exaggeration. Just want to say that he was extremely wealthy. It's like the Gemara said in Yoma 35b, you found someone who was wealthy than Eliezer ben Charsom. That it's just a language. Anyway, אמר לו, Rabbi Shmuel said to him, לכשתגיע אצל אביו, אמור לו אל שגרו בכלים עליו לפניו. So when you go to his father, meaning the father of Ben Bunyas, they said to Bunyas that he wasn't dressed according to his wealth. You have some people that dress like a schleppers, and they have and they earn. So he said he should dress according to what he has, which means you get that blessing, earn it with respect and honor. Don't pretend poor while you are rich, in that sense. And here is the statement we just mentioned, that Rabbi was careful with that. He said, Rabbi mechabed ashirim, Rabbi Akiva mechabed ashirim. So the Meforshim said that it doesn't mean that he honored the rich. He honored those people who basically used to give a lot of tzedakah, and because they have the capability and they did it according to their wealth, so he honored them. Okay, the Darash Rava Bar Mari, there is a pasuk, his sentence in Tehillim 61, Yeshev olam lifnei Elohim chesed ve'emet man yinzeruhu. So he said, man is always like manna from heaven. It means the one, may he be enthroned before God forever, appoint mercy and truth that they may preserve him. So what does that mean? Matai yeshev olam lifnei Elohim. What merits the world survive? Bizman shechesed ve'emet, when they do loving kindness to the poor people, man, that they bring them the food. Man is like mezonot, it's bringing the food before them. Yinzeruhu, they preserve him, which means that the merit of the tzedakah that the rich give to the poor, that make the world a better place to live and survive the world. So again, you hold that the rich people that do tzedakah, they deserve a special recognition, special honor. Rabba bar Rav Chana amar kegon yated shel machreisha. He said that an example, the right of usage, says if the homeowner store a pin or a plug in the tenant's quarters, so the tenant is prohibited to remove the pin from the resident on Shabbat. Why? Because it's muktzeh. It's a set aside. אומר רב נחמן תנא דבי שמואל, דבר הניטל בשבת אוסר, דבר שלא ניטל בשבת אינו אוסר. He said that only object that can be moved on Shabbat is prohibited, otherwise not. תנא מאחי, יש לו תבל, יש לו עששית, וכן כל דבר שניתן בשבת אינו אוסר. He said also that if you have untied produce, or if you have a lump of glass on iron, anything else that may be moved on Shabbat, that the homeowner deposit with him, the tenant does not rent it, prohibited for other residents to use in a courtyard. Now we're going to practical halachot. Shulchan Aruch Or HaChaim 353, שני בתים משני צידי רשות הרבים. Two houses in two sides of the public domain belong to the same person, or if an eruv was established between them. So it is permitted to throw from one house to another house, provided that one house throws above the 10 handbreadth from the ground and the two houses are equal in heights. If they are not the same height, it is prohibited. However, it is permitted to throw an earthenware vessel or any other breakable item if the houses are not an opposite side of a carmelit. It is permitted to throw from one to another under all circumstances. Next, Eiruvo beveit sha'ar, Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 366. They said if one places an Eruv in a gatehouse, balcony, etc., etc., it's not valid. Or one who resides in a gatehouse or balcony, etc., does not impose restriction upon the other residents of the courtyard. And the place that you put the shituf, emerging of the alleyways, may be deposited even in places unsuitable for an eruv, provided that the location is protected. However, it may not be deposited in the airspace of the alleyways. Bnei Chavura sheme'arvim, Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 366. If a group of people are dining together, when Shabbat begins, they may use the bread on the table as an eruv. As we said, because they set up all this table in advance before Shabbat, and they're all invited and they all gather at the same table. This option is available only if they are dining in a house, but not if they're eating in a courtyard. We explained it during the shiur, the reason for that. The last halacha of today, Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 370. If a homeowner permanently stores his items in the living quarters of his residence, the residence do not impose restrictions upon him. This halacha applies only to items that cannot be moved on Shabbat, either due to the weight or due to prohibition. In addition, this ruling pertains only to houses that belong to the homeowner. However, the Beit Yosef said, based on the Rambam, that if the homeowner does not actually own these houses, but merely possesses right to them, the residents restrict each other. The Rema, based on Rabbeinu Yonatan, said that if there are other residents in the courtyard, these residents impose restrictions even if the homeowner has access to his properties.
Hashem.